It's May 14th, 6 o'clock, and we're going to call the Stayton Budget Committee meeting to order. Can I have a roll call of everyone that's here, Keith? Or
Yeah, we can go through.
Alyssa Angelo, Deputy City Recorder.
Keith Campbell, City Manager.
Andy Parks, Financial Consultant.
Priscilla Glidewell, City Councilor.
Pete Cranston, City Member.
Henry Porter, Mayor.
Paige Hook, Citizen Member.
Brent Walker, Citizen Member.
Brian Quigley, City Council.
Mark Cronquist, City Council.
With that, we'll do the election of a chair and vice chair. Is there any nominations for the chair position?
I'd like to nominate Brian Quigley.
I second.
Great. With that, we'll do the vice chair as well then. I'll take nominations for the vice chair. We'll just do it all at once.
Can we nominate people who aren't here?
No. I'll make a nomination to have Paige Hook be the vice chair.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second for the chair to be Brian Quigley and the vice chair to be Paige Hook. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous for the election of the chair and the vice chair. With that, we'll move to the approval of minutes from the May 7th Budget Committee meeting. For those of you that were here the last time, I'll entertain a motion to approve or...
So moved.
Okay, motion to approve. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Motion and a second to approve the minutes from last year, May 7th. I'm sorry, why does it say, this is our last meeting, correct? Sorry, I'm asking what meeting where we had a time issue. So with that, all those in favor of minutes from the May 7th meeting?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimous. With that, we'll move on to the public hearing. Oregon Revised Statutes 221.770 requires 2 public hearings to be held to hear from citizens regarding the use of state revenue sharing funds distributed to the city of Stayton. The purpose of this hearing is to hear public testimony on the proposed use of the funds. Before the opening, the public hearing will receive a staff report. After the staff report, well, we'll go there. Staff report to start with. Correct? Okay, thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair and committee members. In order to receive state shared revenue, a city must be able to provide 4 or more of the following services: police, fire, sewer, street, stormwater, planning, community development type services, and 1 or more utility services. The city of Stayton provides 4 or more of those. Additionally, annually must go through this process to have a public hearing on the potential receipt of these revenues and ultimately how they are proposed to be used and take public comment on that. The schedule that's up on the PowerPoint presentation showing you the 4 state shared revenues that come to the city and their intended uses. The cigarette tax, the liquor tax, and state revenue sharing all go into the general fund and provide public safety and general purposes. And the state gas tax goes into your street fund and is used exclusively for street maintenance and capital construction. The total of those resources is proposed or estimated to be $788,400, representing 2.93% of your overall city budget. Be glad to address any questions you may have.
So Andy, the marijuana tax revenue is not included in that yet, or will be, or?
Is not, will not, and likely may never not. And the reason being is the state has really put forth legislation that makes it so that we can't really talk about it and answer questions specific to it with respect to dollar amounts and so forth. What we can tell you is there is an allotment of marijuana taxes included in the budget document based on the amounts that we've received thus far and then projected out. But it's not one of those that is specifically called out to be discussed in the public session.
You extrapolate it then for a year?
Yes, what we did is we looked at what the initial amounts were. The initial amounts included some payback from when they first enacted the law and started collecting taxes, and then after the state ultimately was paid back for its costs in enacting the law. So we looked at what happened subsequent to that in subsequent quarters, and then using that information, then projected out on what we thought it would be. You know, I can tell you it's a decent amount. It's about the cost of one officer.
I have a question. Can you expound a little bit on what the legislature did and that doesn't allow us to have it as a line item?
This is part of the laws that were passed. The city has to sign secrecy agreements, and we've asked for an opinion from the state on what to do, and we're following that opinion on how we're presenting the information tonight. So it is an odd situation when a budget's supposed to be open and transparent, and this is a line item by the state's own directive that we have to be careful not to disclose. And I know staff, I think you signed, we've all signed agreements saying that under penalty, we will not disclose what that amount is in order for us to receive our funding.
Well, I'm glad we have the funding.
You sworn people can't disclose even, can you get rough estimates?
He just gave you one.
Yeah.
That's
What was
about the
it?
cost of a police officer.
The cost of a police officer.
It'd be one of the
40-ish grand.
larger numbers on that, be the second largest number on that screen is what it is.
Wow. Wow. Pretty good piece of change.
It is.
Page 14 has that number.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Are you done, Andy? You good? I'm done. I will now open the public hearing. If there is anyone that would like to provide testimony regarding the proposed uses of state revenue sharing, please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. And there's nobody there. There being no further public testimony, I close the public hearing, and we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Which would be budget overview. Mr. Parks?
So we'll get started tonight. I guess I'll say, we're open for questions. We have the department heads here, so if you have specific questions to them, I'd encourage you to ask. Try to make this as informal and open to discussion as we can. So I'd encourage questions. We've talked, in here is kind of the stated governing body goals, so we wanted to establish that. Framework for current and future budget developments and finding funding for the priorities that the council has stated are their goals. So with that in mind, we've moved forward with this budget. This is a proposed budget. We are looking for feedback or any sort of suggestions or edits you would like to see us make. So with that, we'll start with the budget summary, and I'll let Andy talk about that.
Yeah, and just before I do, thank you, Keith, is at your place this evening, Alyssa handed out to you 5-year financial forecast. This includes all the city funds with the exception of the system development charge funds, which are restricted in terms of their use and so forth. But these lay out really where you're headed, and they're not down to the dollar type of thing, but they are, I think, a good order of magnitude in where the organization, based on your current operations and so forth, is going. And we'll face some decisions, and some of that's disclosed here. And as we go through that, we'll maybe reference back into this information so that you've got some context in terms of how some of the decisions are made in terms of presenting this proposed budget to you. Okay? With that, your budget this year is $26.9 million. That's an increase of around $4 million over the prior year.
A 19.3% increase?
Yes, and I'll get to that in just a second. 10.7 million is your beginning fund balance. That's a sizable increase over the current or the the current year budget, and an $8.7 million ending fund balance. So there's some spend down of fund balance proposed in the budget. You've got an $18.2 million spending plan, net of transfers, that's $14.7 million. As Keith mentioned, and just covered, with respect to these 5-year forecasts, it lays out with these 5-year plans, the foundation for multi-year planning, to be looking ahead for what the impacts are of capital outlay projects, in particular expansion of services, trying to maintain those existing services and so forth, and ensuring that you've got the resources available to take care of those commitments that you're effectively making, maybe today. As well as downtown planning was something we didn't catch in this slide, but it really goes back to this economic development study in terms of it's going to be comprehensive in terms of what, this is, what that study is looking at, including downtown. Next slide, please. On the resource side, property taxes, that actually includes the marijuana taxes. It's $2,642,000. These numbers are all in thousands, and you can see a significant bump in charges for services. That includes the impact, and we'll get into that when we get into the sewer fund itself. It includes the impact of a couple of projects that are in the sewer fund that are related to sublimity contributions. And we're showing the entire contribution from sublimity in this budget as a resource. Whether they pay it all once or over time, we'll learn here in the near future, but the entire project itself is budgeted as a capital outlay. Your franchise fees are slightly above current year estimates. Miscellaneous, similar licenses and permits, a few $1,000s. And then you'll see a new item that you haven't seen in a couple years, debt proceeds. And this is out in the Stormwater Construction Fund to facilitate completion of that particular project. So the current year resources, excluding the transfers, is around $12.6 million. Way of context, your taxes and fee summaries. The city's permanent rate is $3.32.8. That's your permanent rate. That is fully levied in this budget. You have a 60-cent special levy rate, local option. That's also fully levied in the budget. It's allocated between parks and library and pool. And then we are projecting a 2.9% increase in the taxable assessed value, and this is consistent with what actually occurred last year. Would hope that it would be a little bit higher, but it wasn't. So until we see that trend go in the other direction, we'll be on the conservative side. We also are anticipating a 1/3 increase in your population. That's consistent with what was in the prior year. As far as utility rate adjustments, we're showing a CPI type increase in the water, wastewater, stormwater funds, and streets, not making any change there in the fee given the passage of the local gas tax measure and also the passing of the state transportation package. And then your system development charges are tied to a different inflationary adjustment. It's the engineering news record, the ENR. We're estimating that right now at 3%. So that's what the number is based off of that you'll see in the revenue side on the SDC revenues.
Andy, as I recall, the state passed gas tax increase, not our local option, increases every year for the next several bienniums. Shouldn't it go up for us as well?
The state transportation package is going up, yes, every biennium, and so you'll see in the 5-year forecast, for example, it going up each year.
But we're still reflecting it as a zero, or is that in
We're showing rate adjustments. So the rate adjustment is the city has a $2 per household street fee.
Sure.
We're not showing any change in that street fee, just keeping it at $2.
So the fuel tax, the state fuel tax revenue is an intergovernmental transfer increase then?
It's intergovernmental, and yeah, we're showing
Even
that
though
as
it's
a...
dedicated to streets.
It's dedicated to streets, and it's shown based on additional population, because it's population-based, and then the per capita number is increasing. And And I don't have the number right in front of me, but I can pull it out and go through that. But yeah, it's increasing this year, and then next year, and then each biennium thereafter, it's going up incrementally as well. And so I think the last numbers we looked at were, what, 1.7 million over 10 years for the city of Stayton.
Yeah, it's a significant amount of money.
Right.
But that's from the state gas tax.
That's exclusively from the state.
New revenue from the state gas taxes.
Right. That was completely unplanned for last year. Right. Okay?
Have you been able to tell this new cap and trade business the governor is for, how that's going to affect it?
No, and really haven't studied it yet. I mean, to be honest, Brent, I mean, just until it actually happens and there's some real evidence, it's something that, state economists are maybe looking at a little bit, but the impact, all the way down to, the local government through state gas tax, hard to know that right now. On the expenditure side, you're seeing some increases here, and I think these are covered in Keith's budget message, and I'll highlight those. Personnel, $5.2 million. That's an increase of $591,000, or almost 13% over the current year. Of that, though, $410,000 is associated with a one-time contribution to the city's retirement plan to help reduce its unfunded actuarial liability. We have not yet received Milliman's updated report that would show what the actual amount is. The trend on that was, and I think it's in the budget document, is around $600,000 was the unfunded amount. By making this investment, the objective is to see the contribution rate on retirement be able to be maintained at its current 18.3 rate.
Is that a good time to discuss UALs? Because it's the first time it's come up in the budget. And do we want to, does everybody here know that the city has, the police officers are in PERS, the city left PERS for its primary non-police employee base in 2010 budget year. And why is our fund only returning 3.1%?
Why is that fund return? Why is the retirement?
Everything, because we started, I could see it if we started in 2006, 2007, and got crippled by the Great Recession or something, but we come out of Obama's slow recovery and then to Trump's extremely fast recovery, like him or hate him. We're still only returning 3.1%, which is... Yeah,
I think the number you're referring to is a couple years old, actually.
It's a 2015 from Million, is what I got at.
That's like 3 years old now. So the new numbers, we have yet to receive the new numbers to see what impact those returns are having on the UAL as well as future contribution.
But our UAL is predicated on that 3.1%. We're closing that gap just because of natural growth, or close that gap. Retirement funds are a tripod, three things. It's the number of employees, the contributions of the employees, and the return from the plan. And our employee base hasn't increased. Our return from the plan has increased dramatically from that 3.1%. So aren't we organically growing that UAL to sea level, to zero?
No, and I can come back to that if you guys like. But the 3.1 is not as you're explaining. So let me come back to that at a later point, okay? But net of the contribution to the UAL, the net increase in personnel costs is $181,000 budgeted, or a 3.9% increase, which includes, and Keith, I think we'll cover this in personnel, 2% COLA as well as steps and so forth. Materials and services is at $4.4 million. That's an increase of $579,000, a 15.3% increase. However, that number includes $400,000 one time for Community Development Block Grant, which is a new program funded by an offsetting revenue. Excluding that number, materials and services is up $179,000, or 4.7%. A significant piece of that you'll see is out in the sewer operation, and it's a couple of the different things that Lance will go over with you in his presentation. Capital outlay is, $3.99 million, an increase of $1.5 million, or almost $1.6 million, a significant increase. A big part of this is the construction of the retention, storm drainage retention regional facility. And again, Lance will go over that with you when we get to that. Debt service, this year, there's no change in terms of the outstanding debt and the types of payments. It's a rounding error as it relates to the dollar amount. You're seeing less dollars in contingency as we spend down some of these balances to complete the capital projects. The unappropriated balance, however, does go up $1.2 million over, across the organization. It's about a 46% increase. General fund has a couple $100,000 of that, so their fund balance is greater. Water has a couple $100,000. Their fund balance is a little bit greater, and then sewer is increased by about $790,000. And again, that is primarily, with these contributions coming, hopefully from, in total anyway, from sublimity.
But the general fund, the 232,000, is not having to do with sublimity. The sewer fund, 790 to something is sublimity, right? I mean, there's a 200 and change you just talked about, and I see here for the general fund increase.
Yes.
That has nothing to do with sublimity.
No, I was talking specifically about the sewer, having to do with sublimity.
But the sewer is 700 and change, and that's from
Right.
sublimity, right. So why is the general fund and the other ones, why are they higher?
General fund's higher for a combination of things. One, we ended up having a higher beginning balance last year than what we had projected. Two, rather than spend down at the end of the year, we actually had a net, or projecting there be a slight increase to the ending fund balance, and that's really what's causing that. You got personnel.
So this is our personnel summary. This includes all the FTEs for the city. Just a reminder that we, in the 17-18 budget, we took back over the pool, so that's where the increase for the FTEs comes from 15, 16, 16, 17. This year we have just a total net increase of just 0.2% or 2.2 FTEs. As kind of mentioned, we have some contractual obligations with the police and AFSCME unions, and that's a 2% COLA. That's by contract. We follow that for management non-representatives to follow those at 2%, and then we're seeing a 5% increase in health insurance costs as well.
Nothing. I was asking how I get a 5% increase in my health insurance. Mine
That's
jumped
just
by about 20%.
The costs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
mine went up by
We're
20%.
looking for, I think we've got an ad out for the wastewater engineer.
I'm not qualified for that.
Part of that is we have a pool fund from CIS, so there's contractual agreements based off the size of the pool that does help with our costs, but it is a long-term concern for the city.
The debt summary, this should show at the very top amounts in thousands. Apologize for that omission. You can see started the current fiscal year with about $15.8 million worth of debt, paying down $675,000, leaving you with the year into the year at $15.2 million. Next year, we're again proposing up to $725,000 debt to help with the funding of the detention facility. You're seeing reductions of $672,000, and basically at a wash in terms of beginning and ending. Some just general stats, trend types information going back to 2015. The debt per capita for the city was $2,200. That is decreasing to around $1,950 at the end of 2019. Your debt coverage ratios, and this is important in terms of showing the strength of the organization to pay its debt. And when you're issuing debt, you're typically, if you're out publicly getting dollars, you're seeing a number of 1.25 or greater is what is required to be maintained. And you can see your water is trending down a little bit here in 19. It's held steady, but the budget number is showing a little bit less. In wastewater, it's showing a number that is less, and it's something to be, for us to be very mindful of as we go forward. As we look, the last information there is the debt capacity. This is if you needed money to do a project based on where your rates are today and your revenue less your operating expenses, how much debt would you be able to go borrow? And you can see in water, that number's down under $1 million. Wastewater right now is a negative. And again, this is looking at, having money from somebody from the outside, a bond underwriter, providing 1.25 coverage. This number of minus 1.1 might be something that's enticing to the state to come in and provide grant or matching money, but it's nothing that a private sector would want to be loaning money on. So it is something we've got to pay attention to, and this again is some of the areas that Lance will go over in terms of some of his increased costs and what he's anticipating there on his operation.
Is that wastewater negative debt capacity impacted by the stormwater retention, 725 or not?
No, they're
So that's
completely
independent of that?
independent, yes.
This might be problematic for us depending on what happens at Detroit, right?
I mean, these are concerns, and Detroit is, we'll talk about that in one of the slides.
Okay.
Detroit is one of our long-term and ongoing issues, and I think something that, especially from the city council point of view, we're going to have to be more engaged, especially as we continue along in this conversation.
Okay, thank you.
This is just showing you where the different capital items are being budgeted. You got vehicles of nearly a couple $100,000, about $80,000 worth of equipment, and then your different functions. Within the vehicles, you have a vehicle that is sewer water, but it's shown separately as vehicles as opposed to.
The crane truck?
Pardon?
The crane truck for
Yes.
100,000?
Right, 125 I think in total.
125,000 the crane truck?
Right.
And that's in sewer water, not in vehicles?
It's in vehicle, I've separated it out to show as vehicles.
2 police vehicles.
There's a police vehicle and then the 125 for the item
Okay.
in the sewer water. 25 in water and 100 in sewer, I believe. Okay? Now, this is, again, something for you, big picture, kind of, keep in mind, what, by these funds that have major infrastructure spending, the estimated annual needs, we're not quite sure on streets or parks or stormwater where those would be. We're in process of getting master plans updated and so forth. And as you recall, the master plans on the streets and water and sewer were based on a much faster growth rate. But on water and sewer, we have at least a decent idea what those ought to be in order of magnitude numbers. The FY19 budget shows you how much we have in the budget proposed, and then the capacity number is taking away all the items that are committed funding elsewhere. The amount of money that's committed to personnel, materials, debt service, transfers, and so forth. And then this is the remaining amount that could be used for capital outlay. And you can see we do have, with the money that the street transportation package, the local gas tax, you're in pretty decent shape on the streets. That's up about $300,000, $400,000 from last year when we presented this slide to you. And you can see water and sewer, again, these are somewhat concerning. Stormwater, for the demands that are out there, that's a very skinny number as well. So water, sewer, stormwater, are below where you would like them to be.
So which number, that says the estimated need is over $200,000, which the capacity number is supposed to be over $200,000?
Ideally, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, ideally, you would have the capacity on an annual basis to be able to spend the estimated annual need.
So
Whether you spend it or not, just the ability to do that would be ideal.
predicated on, I realize that the growth patterns predicted in the old days were highly optimistic. However, looking at the number of construction starts and the number of lots that have been proposed in the new subdivisions, are we not poised for another period of growth for the first time in a long time? with our SDC charges and.
Yeah, the SDC charges cover a big chunk of that. What this is really aimed at is maintaining the existing infrastructure.
But I mean, the SDC charges on Second and Florence are going to be 200 and change.
But they can't go to that.
But they can't be used for maintenance, right? This is just what you should be reinvesting in your systems today, reinvesting in.
But an SDC
maintaining-
charge for, in the central city core, we have the house that was burned as an example, and there's going to be some sewer water charges, and if Second and Florence comes up, there's going to be some sewer and water SDCs there. Now, can't those SDCs be used for maintenance, or are they used for expansion when they're in existing areas that have sewer and water already? We already have sewer and water pipes in there. We're not going to change the infrastructure there. Where do those SDCs go?
They'll go to qualified improvements costs throughout the rest of the
They
city.
can help offset this.
Not at all. Yeah, this is, has nothing to do with SDCs, okay? This is, completely to do with maintenance. And SDCs and maintenance are two different things altogether. The demand for SDCs and the demand for growth-related items is going to be predicated on what is the growth, of the community. And, that may present its own challenges, if and when that begins to happen. Okay? And these are some slides that, we've gone over the last couple of years. This is information from a data gathering company I have, Civa Data. I have not updated this information, right now. What I can tell you, though, in keeping track and watching what other communities are doing, they're all, a very hefty percentage of them are increasing the rates by CPI or greater in water, wastewater, stormwater, and street fees. And so far, at least, what the last 2 years, you guys have been holding steady. So in all of these particular graphics, the city is the blue, the black is the average, and then the green is the max, and the red, the min. You'll see in all instances, with the exception of sewer, the city of Stayton is below the average, in some cases well below the average. In wastewater, you're above the average, however, that is narrowing, both on the commercial and residential side. So if we got to, that's the stormwater, I think the sewer is probably back, right there. Yeah, you have a fixed rate above 50, and you can see it's break even at around 10 CCF. Average household consumption is going to be in the 5 to 6 CCF range, and so the average of communities in Oregon is, in the $45 range at the time this was done in 2016. So increase that average from 45 to 48, 49. You're getting, fairly close, even at the average, or excuse me, even at the average consumption. So that black line continues to move to the left. And so out of 3 utilities, or out of 4 utilities, stormwater, you're low, water, you're low, and street fee, you're low, and sewer, you're a little high. Overall, if we get to the summary slide there, Keith, I think, overall, you're going to find that, combined bill for all those services, as you look at communities around the state, similar size and so forth, you're going to see that Stayton is below the average overall. Okay. We'll jump into the general fund. Yeah, there's just this one slide, and the departmental presentations will follow. This just covers your resources, taxes of $2,075,000, and once again, a 2.9% increase in the taxable assessed value, levying the full rate, and does include your local marijuana taxes. The franchise fees, these are increasing. We're showing them increasing from a range depending on the specific franchise of 1 to 3.1% over the current year estimated number.
So, and if you look at the franchise fees, and I don't want to open the Pacific Power can of worms, but theirs went up dramatically, but SCDC didn't change at all, for example. Or, you know, there are 4 franchise fees, Northwest Natural, SCTC, a couple of, and sanitaries, but the Pacific Powers went up dramatically compared to the others. Is there a reason that some went up and others didn't, or?
Yeah, I think it generally going to be a couple of things happen. I think one is on the utility side, whether it be electricity or natural gas, is weather is a big player in that as well as the economy, right? And if the economy is doing better and it's colder, people are going to be keeping their house
Using more
warmer and so
utilities,
forth.
but-
Right. And it just varies year to year in terms of, you know, I think when the economy was bad, people were keeping their house much cooler, and you saw significant reductions there. We continue to see people moving away from landline phones, continue to see people moving away from cable television as well. So those are not growing. The ones that are, you know, the electric utility, natural gas, and then your solid waste provider, you know, the trash, you know, as well. Right. And those are going to be somewhat predicated too on, you know, what type of rate increases they're, you know, bringing in. In solid waste, there is potential for a rate increase there because of the, you know, what's going on with the deals in China.
Waste to China,
And,
yeah.
you know, the inability to do recycling. Your intergovernmental revenue is increased significantly due to the CDBG funding of $400,000 proposed.
So that's just a one-turn type pass-through, so it.
So what is that grant for?
Dan, I think, can answer that one back.
Is it scheduled for later? Because that's scheduled for later.
Yeah, I think we'll get to each one in the fund, right?
Right.
It's just a one-time thing, so it's just 400,000 goes through the elephant.
Okay.
Licenses and permits, we're really showing no change there. Charges for services, again, a very small number, we're showing that reduced slightly. And then miscellaneous, there's some things in, that happened this past year that we don't anticipate happening again.
So what is
Settlements.
miscellaneous in $232,000? That's an awful lot of trips to Office Depot.
It's all things that don't fit into one of those other categories. An example would be interest earnings, rent, lawsuit settlements, et cetera, are all showing up in miscellaneous. And I think, yeah, you'll see all that in your line item detail in terms of what's all part of that. And then the transfer number includes $70,000 from the vehicle replacement fund. One, to close down that fund, and then two, that $70,000 is going into an investment in the city's unfunded liability for its retirement plan. So those are your current year, or I should say, your total resources for the general fund, and that beginning balance, it's an increase of $3,000 over last year's balance, but relative to last year's budgeted number, it's up almost a couple $100,000.
Good to go, Chief?
Mayor, council, and committee members, the Stayton Police Department proudly provides public safety to our community 24 hours a day. As a department, we believe building public trust with all community stakeholders is essential. We strive to be relevant in the community by becoming entrenched with those who live, work, and visit our area. Our department's top goal is to positively impact the livability of Stayton through public safety. Our philosophy is that we are problem solvers. Public safety is about solving problems with an understanding that each scenario is unique and may have a different solution. This means we find ways to fix the problems using a variety of current crime-solving solutions. A few examples of this include dedicated traffic enforcement to high crash areas, concentrated patrol areas near known drug houses, code enforcement near and around unsafe buildings and dangerous junk accumulations, working with the mentally ill to share resources to them, active involvement with school threat assessments, building relationships with kids in schools, vacation home checks to help prevent burglaries, working with landlords to address problem properties, and the annual fishing derby to connect with high-risk youth. Oops. Too far? Here's my staffing. Just get turned around. Okay, now see it. Okay. What's that? Refer to that. Okay. So our police department, I'm missing a slide in here, which is our staffing slide, and you can refer to it in your book there.
It's on page 35 of 145.
So our police department staff includes the chief, a lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and 9 patrol officers. The civilian staff includes 1 full-time records clerk, 1 part-time records clerk, 2 part-time code enforcement officers. We supplement our staff with up to 10 volunteer reserve officers and 6 cadet officers. Our staff levels went up last year by raising our code enforcement officer from a .3 FTE position to a 1 FTE position. By doing this, we brought code enforcement staffing back up to the level it was prior to cutting the position in 2008 for financial reasons. This increase has positively affected our ability to deal with code enforcement issues, which impact the livability of Stayton. This coming year, we will not be making any changes to our staffing levels. So, our accomplishments. This past year, we accomplished many goals. We completed our multi-phase, multi-year project to implement electronic ticketing. This allows for greater efficiency for our officers, record keeping, and our court system. We improved our traffic safety program by improving our data-driven enforcement, which means we do enforcement where the accidents are at and where there are safety issues based on the data collection. We continued our equipment replacement program, and we installed automatic defibrillators in every patrol car through a grant through the fire district. And we've actually been able to assist with at least 3 or 4 this past year heart attacks that people have had. They've been used. This past year, we continue to use the funds from a grant for a youth cadet program, which has been very successful. The cadets have been going through a training program that we created and have been able to assist on several major incidents and community events. As already spoken about, we increased our code enforcement and greatly increased our enforcement activities in the code enforcement area.
So Chief, there's a couple questions, maybe Andy can answer them as well. On your line item budget, there's a building maintenance went from 8,000 to 19,000.
Yes, actually, I'll get to that a little bit later in the slides.
Cool. The other one is firearms training. You got the cleanest budget here.
So, strategic issues. To fulfill our department's top goal of positively impacting the livability of Stayton through public safety, we have 6 priorities we concentrate on within our budget. And this is how we base our needs based on these priorities. 24-hour patrols to support our detective unit, a school resource officer assigned to the schools, connecting with the community, strong volunteer program, and an enhanced traffic safety program. The Stayton Police Department continues to cherish our opportunity to serve the Stayton community. As a department, we will always strive to be relevant in our community's public safety needs. We have many performance measures that we look at to determine our effectiveness. Some of these measures include police activity and investigated incidents, citations and warnings versus traffic accidents, juvenile abuse cases, arrests, volunteer hours, and peer court cases. Over the past year, officers have handled 10,640 incidents. These incidents have included everything from self-initiated officer activities like traffic stops, after-hours business checks, drug investigations, to citizen-reported incidents such as assaults, burglaries, and death investigations. Our department saw a reduction in traffic accidents through traffic enforcement. In 2016, the Stayton Police Department responded to 117 accidents, while in 2017 this number dropped to 67 accidents. In 2017, we focused strongly on code enforcement, which greatly affects the livability of our community. Thanks to this focus, our department more than doubled our code enforcement response from 291 incidents in 2016 up to 670 in 2017. Yeah.
Why did the volunteers hours get cut in almost half?
One of the issues that we come up with was with our reserves.
Okay, so that's how many people we have volunteering for the police department, not how many hours police are volunteering.
That's hours.
Okay.
That's hours that they put in. And the big drop was one of the issues that we come across is that we do train our reserves very, very well.
And they keep getting cut.
And they get picked up by other agencies. So we're in a hiring process right now for reserves, and we're going to try to build that number back up again. So,
I thought that's what it was, but I just figured I'd
yes.
Fewer
We also had a-
fewer hours.
What?
Fewer reserves, fewer hours.
Yeah. I wish the police department would stop stealing our reserves. We should charge them at that.
Believe me, I give them a hard time every time I see them at different meetings. But I'm also actually very proud of those guys and happy to see them get picked up and proud of the fact that they do get snagged up because we do a good job of training them.
Well, it does prove that you guys are doing something right if they're getting picked up by other agencies.
Yes.
Because if you weren't training them right, then they wouldn't be wanted.
No. This coming year, we have many opportunities we will be working on. We will continue our data-driven police practices, targeted patrols, and traffic safety, striving for efficient police practices. We will continue heavily to recruit quality people who are interested in becoming reserve police officers for the community. We will continue to increase our community and school presence through our school resource officer program and community outreach programs such as Coffee with a Cop, National Night Out, neighborhood foot patrols, and community safety classes, to name a few. One of our troubling issues in the community is child abuse, as you saw in that last slide. We will continue to partner with other organizations to work to reduce this, such as Family Building Blocks. We will continue to work with the regional policing agencies to replace our outdated records management system. This multi-year upgrade project should be completed in January of 2019. We will also continue to update our equipment and vehicles. Finally, a few years ago, the city implemented a municipal court system. This has been working very well to hold violators accountable, and we will explore the option of increasing the crime types that are handled in this court system. The major changes to this year's budget include continuing our equipment replacement program, which includes a new patrol car. We'll also continue to use the $18,000 grant we received from the Oregon Community Foundation for our youth cadet program. We will also be painting and repairing the outside of the police department, renovating the police department range, and updating our evidence and storage area.
So that range update is where the firearms range?
Yes. Plan. Do you have any questions regarding the police department?
Chief, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Paige.
What RMS are you guys updating to? Like, how did you guys decide which one you're going to go to? Is it a huge cost? Has that already been paid for?
Yes. Well, actually, there's several parts to that question. So the Mark 43 is the software that we will be going to. We went through an extensive RFP process with Salem. We joined in with 16 other agencies in the area to do a records management system. And the reason for doing that is these records management systems usually cost between $2 and $6 million to implement, and one agency can't take care of that cost all on their own. And so we've all joined together. The other part to that is that we're able to see their reports that they're dealing with. So if somebody is being arrested on a bunch of different burglaries and stolen vehicles out of Salem, there's a good likelihood that we'll be dealing with that same person as well out here.
That's great. Is that, what other cities? Salem and us and?
Yes, Salem, Monmouth, Independence, Dallas, Almsville, Turner, us, Jervis.
Wow.
I'm trying to think of who else is in that group.
That's great that you guys can work
So,
across those jurisdictional
Yeah.
lines.
I think the only ones that are not involved in that are, is Marion County does their own system, and then Woodburn and the surrounding areas, agencies around there use their own system as well. We're really pushing and trying to get everybody on the same system, but that's a little tricky. What we did is, over the the last system was implemented in 2004. And we increased our fees higher than what it would cost to operate that system since then, knowing that we would have to do an upgrade on the system. The one thing that's nice about this particular system is this new one is that it's web-based, where in the past most systems have been server-based. In fact, most of them still are. This particular company is one of the few that is web-based.
How helpful is that?
Chief, as far as the school resource officer goes,
Yes.
does the school district contribute financially for that position?
They do not at this time.
And do we have a resource officer extended into Sublimity?
No.
Do you know what the composition of residents versus non-residents is at Stayton High School?
I don't know what
Okay.
the mix is.
So we should probably look at in the future.
So, yep. We also do provide the school resource officer to Regis and St. Mary's as
Okay,
well.
Same thing.
So when you guys put AEDs in all the patrol cars,
Yes.
did you guys also like put any like naloxone or anything in your guys'
Yes.
kits? So you guys carry those
Yes,
too?
we do
cool.
carry that as well.
And when
So,
did you start doing that?
The AEDs was earlier this past year, and the naloxone went in about 6 months ago.
Nice.
That's just a guess of where it was. I'm trying to remember back when we had our training on it, so,
Any other questions for the chief? Thanks, Chief.
thank you.
Move on to, who's going, Dan?
Which button do we push? There we go. I get to represent the entire planning department because I am it.
Hey, where's Lisa?
She's in the Public Works Administrative Office, but I do get to fund a portion of her salary. So there is no change proposed in the staffing of the planning department. It will continue to be just the planning director. The code enforcement officer was moved out of the planning department a few years ago and into the police department. The planning department spends most of its time on what many communities call current planning. It is staffing the planning commission, doing development review, answering phone calls, public service at the counter, et cetera, on development activity. But we are also involved in more long-range planning issues, downtown revitalization, trying to stimulate development in the Wilco Road industrial area. This year's budget included funding for consultant work on a long-range economic development strategy. That those funds that RFP has not yet gone out. We expect that it will go out before the end of the fiscal year, but the money will not be spent in this year. It is included in next year's budget again, and expect that will be spent.
$90,000 carried through, wasn't it?
Yes, that's about what it is that it will not be spent this year and appears again in next year's budget. And the other issue that I've put up here is strategic issues. I think there needs to be a discussion about policies regarding annexation. We're based on what I call shoppers and tire kickers. There may be an increase in annexation applications, and it's something I think for the council to discuss at a policy level of how do we want to address what properties get annexed, when, how, priorities, et cetera. So far, this calendar year, land use applications have increased. Last year, there were 9 applications throughout the entire calendar year. So far, when this slide was prepared, there were 8. We're now have 1 more that's been submitted. So in the first 5 months of the year, we've already met 12 months' worth of development activity applications submitted to the planning department.
Land use application, that's building permits?
No,
or is
no, that is a
changing-
site plan review, an application for a zone map amendment, a subdivision.
Okay.
Something that requires processing, public notice, et cetera, not just a
Okay.
building permit.
Okay.
In prior years, did you, like in the last half of the year, is it common for people to still be putting in land use applications, or is it more common for them to do that in the beginning part of the year anyway?
There
What's the
is no
difference?
pattern to the seasonality of
Okay.
it at all.
So you're expecting that
So
you'll continue to get
I'm
more throughout the year?
expecting that since we've gotten 9 by the end of the first 4.5 months of the year, that we
Okay.
will probably double that at least by the end of the year, particularly with the increase in the number of phone calls and people coming in asking questions and pre-application meetings that have not yet resulted in applications. Again, no change in personnel services. The contract services that is in the proposed budget includes the economic development study that was in this year's budget but will not be spent. And something new that we're proposing for this year is a proposal for $10,000 to be available to neighborhood groups for neighborhood improvement grants. That would be, for years, there's been grants that the city council has handed out to local nonprofit organizations that mostly pay for operating funds. This would be to neighborhood groups. While we don't have formal neighborhood associations like larger cities do, it would give the opportunity for neighbors to get together, make a proposal to the city for some improvement in their neighborhood, and the grant funds would be available for that.
This is in addition to the $10,000 in grant.
This is in addition to the grant funds the council has traditionally been handing out the past few years.
And would the council oversee these, or would the planning oversee these?
The council would be involved in it, but we haven't, since the budget committee has not passed on this budget, we have not fleshed out the details of how this would operate. No reason to do so until we know their support for actually having the program.
So when wanting support, how are you guys planning to let the community know that these could be available for them? What kind of platforms would you
We will do that
put
through
on?
the newsletter that goes in the utility bills, through the website, and through the use of social media.
Okay. And has anyone come to you already saying, we want funds like this? Is that how you got the idea, or where did this idea come from for improvement grants?
The idea comes from other communities who have
Okay.
similar programs.
So no one has come in and said, we're interested in these?
No.
Okay.
Are there any restrictions on what can and can't be done? I mean, if you have a street that needs a lot of, say, you have a street that's got 10 or 12 trees that are old, you want to cut them down, put new trees up, would that work?
I would envision that would be something that would work, or where the trees have already been cut down and need to be replaced, or
Would
other
that-
minor street improvements, or improvements to
Sidewalks?
lands. Well, sidewalks are part of the street, so yes. Those are the types of things that I have in mind. So-
How much neighborhood and buy-in do you need?
Well, again, we haven't.
We haven't got there yet.
Okay.
The program doesn't exist yet because we haven't figured out the details, because we don't know whether there's the support to even establish the program.
I think it's a good idea, having served on neighborhood boards in other cities. I think it's a good opportunity. And as 50% of the residents on East Water Street all
100% of the residents on East Water Street need to get together.
Yeah, like I said, my only neighbor, I'm 100% of East Water Street.
I'm sorry, I have just one more question. I'm sorry. Are you going to be like making some type of committee to help build this program at all? Like having citizens involved in how they'd like to see this formed or
That would
anything?
probably be up to council whether they want to appoint an advisory committee.
Okay, all right.
Sounds good.
I don't know.
Any other questions for the planning department?
Nothing else?
Since the property out on Wilco Road on the north end is going to sell this week, have you had much interest from prospective buyers?
We processed and approved a site plan review application about 4 years ago. We had, that felt that after it was approved by the city, the developer walked away from the property. We had pre-application meetings with 2 other parties a year to a year and a half ago or so, who ended up walking away from the property. And I think it's because of that lack of interest that the owner, who's had the property on the market at least for the past 10 years or so since he's owned it, decided to sell it through this auction that either just took place or is about to end. I'm not quite sure what the date is. No, it's my understanding that it was not a bank foreclosure type thing.
Okay.
But that's based on my conversation with the listing broker. But there's been nobody who, since the auction was advertised, there's been nobody who has contacted the planning department asking questions.
Any other questions? Nope. Thank you.
So we'll continue with the general fund by default. I'll take over a few of these funds and go over them. Community center is where we're at right now. Community center is supported by Public Works Administration. Some data on the number of rentals events from last year, kind of events, and the senior meals program. We just recently, for this year's budget, included 2 new high-efficiency furnace or HVAC systems that were just recently installed, which I think is working pretty well from what we can feel going on today. And it looks like we have our Windows 10 update. And then for next year's budget, the one big change is we're looking to replace the blinds back on the windows, which need to be replaced. In my budget message at some point, we talked about the need at some point to look at the life cycle of this community center and maybe start making some decisions on what we'd like for this to be in the future or how we'd like to proceed with the community center. I think it's obvious it's like I said, reached the end of its life cycle, and we probably need to start having some conversations about what we can do in terms of where the future holds for the community center. But that's in the future. I think if you look at the 5-year forecast, we have some money allocated to begin to have those conversations. Questions on the community center?
How many of the 208 events are non-governmental? Not city council meetings, non-senior feeding things?
I don't know the breakdown. That was, we got the information from Public Works. Lance, do you?
What was the question? I didn't hear it.
Well, how many of the 208 are what do we charge for this place for the public?
But you can come by my office or call me and I can let you know, or call Ms. Meyer. I don't remember.
That's fine.
I don't memorize those. But of the 200 events rented, that has nothing to do with senior meals or anything. That's other people rented. And I don't have a breakdown. And I don't know if they can tell us, you know?
Is it an
Mark,
option
can you-
to push it more?
Can you bring the mic up too?
I'm sorry. Is it an option to market it more aggressively, to increase rental income, to put that money aside for replacement eventually or anything? I mean, I don't know.
Well, we've got 200 events in 365 days. What is that? 67?
That's 67, yeah, so, yeah.
I'm not sure what you're shooting for, but perhaps we can go a little bit more.
Oh, just an idea. I mean, if we're gonna,
Yeah, I haven't thought about it really. It's on our Facebook page.
Another-
I think it's on our Facebook page.
Another item for another time.
Municipal courts, I will grab onto something that the police chief talked about, which we are looking to increase what's going out of the court. One of the changes on here, which is noted at the bottom of this slide right here, is we'll begin processing DUIs through our court. That's a change that we've been looking forward to. There's more obligations. When we first took over the court, we had the conversation about just wanting to take our time and make sure we didn't overextend ourselves. And I think we're still seeing, we're seeing the court have success and continue to move forward. So as Rich stated earlier, I think we'll be looking to continue to expand our municipal court, and it's nice to have that local control and to have that enforcement, and then the courts, kind of work hand in hand. It helps our officers know where and how to focus on their energies to be best served. So there is data on here. There's a half-time FTE clerk and a contracted judge. Jonathan Clark is our contracted judge. Last year they had 40 court days, 37 trials, 1,015 process cases, and 930 cases that were fully processed. So there really is no big changes to the court. The building is still relatively new. We have had discussions about maybe extending our courts to a truancy court with the school districts. That's been going on for several years, and is something that could be on the radar. And the city has made it aware that we are interested in partnering on that program, and we'll see if that progresses any further. So with that, I'll be happy to answer what I can about the municipal court.
How many smaller things do we not process here in Stayton?
Rich, what are some of the things we don't process here in Stayton?
Any misdemeanors and felonies that all go to a circuit court currently.
So if they require prison time or jail time, we don't deal with it?
Correct. We are looking at changing that for DUIs only.
Okay.
And doing the DUIs through here as well.
Okay.
There's quite a few municipal courts that handle the DUIs, and they can be done here and tracked through here, where anything else has bigger implications for future issues that you want to track, like domestics. There's no way that the circuit court would allow us to even handle those. Things like that. So.
What's the difference between a processed case and a case processed?
I'm not really sure. I'd have to check in and get back with you.
85 cases.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
We were asking the same thing.
I think it means it was scheduled and then they didn't show up.
They didn't show up. Right.
So 930 didn't show up?
No, you'd have
the difference.
The difference didn't show up.
75 didn't, 85 didn't show. Still 10%.
We could definitely check and find out, confirm what that is.
I don't care, actually. I just wondered what.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good question. I mean,
I'm just saying, don't-
we have the information there, so what is it and how is it? Right.
That would make complete sense. That is 1,015 cases that were sent to the municipal court,
Yep.
and 930 of those were actually heard by the judge or
Adjudicated.
by the judge.
So 930 have been finalized, and the other 15 we need to go and
Well, the other
harass about getting our money.
85.
85, yeah.
Did not show up.
That's actually a pretty good ratio.
It is a very good ratio.
We deal with our mess.
Governing body, there's really no big changes from the previous years. I'll just highlight that there is $6,000 budgeted, which is essentially $1,000 per member of the governing body for training and conferences. And the budget includes the League of Oregon Cities dues. And then there was talk earlier about the community grant program, which is done every year. And that's a $5,000 community grant program, and it's still the same budget proposed for the governing body for that program. Any questions about that?
Yeah, on the administration budget, there's a capital outlay proposed for 18-19 of $50,000.
On which budget?
Your city manager administration, your administration budget.
Well, we're getting ready to get to the administration budget right now, so let's move on to that.
I guess I don't see the governing body one in here. What page is that on?
325.
Okay, well, it's labeled administration for us then, if it's on page 45.
Yeah, we should probably delineate it's under administration, but
Oh,
just,
okay.
we should highlight that it's actually
Okay, so I
administration
see
under.
this council expenses one, that's the governing body
Yeah.
one? Okay. And so does that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Does that include like the wonderful training that we got from the planning department for like, or is that a different expense?
That's planning.
That was priceless.
Really was priceless. So what kind of, sorry, besides the League of Oregon Cities dues and the grants, like what, is it $1,000
Yeah,
for
there's
trainings and
Yeah,
stuff,
there's
really?
opportunities for trainings. I know.
Workshops,
Workshops.
Yeah, I was
Main Street.
privileged to attend a boot camp for newly elected officials. It was an awesome,
Interesting, okay.
it was a grueling early weekend, but it was an awesome camp.
Great, thank you.
So staffing levels for the city manager's office, there's been no proposed changes, and this has remained pretty consistent. Noting for 15 and 16, there was a change in how we actually build some of those entities, the change that we made. So one of the big parts of this office is addressing the goals of the governing body. So these first three slides right here are going to be detailing of kind of what the goals were in listing specifically what the action items were for these items. So goal number 1 was to address street maintenance. Goal number 2 was economic development with the action items related to those. Goal number 3 was neighborhood preservation, and again, with the action items associated with that. So I wanted to highlight in the budget, transportation master plan has already been in place. We expect that to continue through the upcoming budget year, so we have monies in place to continue with that program as we complete that master plan. Talk about addressing street maintenance as well. We're estimating $215,000 in revenue from our local gas tax, which was passed in May of 2017. The partnership we just signed an agreement with for Marion County on the slurry seal program, and the success of that was we were able to halve the cost of our slurry seal program, which means we were able to double the output of that. And then the goal was to review street standards, which will be coming to the council in June of this year, so upcoming. Economic development, Dan talked a little bit about this. We plan on the proposal RFP going out shortly, which will mean it'll extend through the next year. Code review is still ongoing, but it's something we know we need to work more on and to be a little more aggressive with. Support and revitalize the downtown. Friends of Old Town Stayton are now revitalized downtown. We've done that through our $5,000 grant through Dan and through helping support the rare applicant that they had. And then the Shaft Golf Club Wilco improvements for the regional partnership. So we had a meeting with the county at the beginning of the year, including with the regional solutions team and Business Oregon, an attempt to try to get stakeholders in place to help us with the improvements on Shaft Golf Club and Wilco Road. And those improvements are estimated to be in the $3 million range. So this is a big project, an ongoing project, and something that we'll continue to have conversations with the governing body in the future about as we continue to work towards that.
Keith, is there money budgeted for RARE or RARE 2.0 or something in 18-19?
No, we do not have any money budgeted for the rare in 2018 or 19. Steve Poussin came after the budget had been completed and said that the Brown House and the revitalized downtown was looking at another rare, but that conversation didn't occur before.
The improvements on Golf Club, Shaft, Wilco, what are we looking at doing down there?
Signalization of that intersection, and also expansion of the roadway.
Making Golf Club a 3-lane road? Or anything bigger than what it is?
It's proposed to be 5 lanes, Dan, right? But we think 3 lanes will actually be sufficient.
Anything's better than hosing off people.
The current angle of the road would mean that if for a stoplight to go in, we'd have to adjust that angle because the speeds would be too fast at the angle would be, so it would require quite a bit of redevelopment to that road as well, and then infrastructure improvements as well. And we've thrown out $3 million. That's just a preliminary number, but I think it's a pretty close estimate of what that intersection would cost. So we've been working with trying to, all 3 of those roads are county roads, with the county to try to do that, and also with entities in the state to try to help as well. As we look, there's funding solutions for that. And we know development that continues in that area is going to eventually trigger a need for the signalization, and so we're trying to prevent development from being stopped because of that burden.
Accidents on that road have tripled in the last 3 years. Just from my observation of going out and picking people up. Yeah, I think I've been out there 5 times this year for 2 car accidents, and that's just I get about half of them. So yeah,
Okay.
it's that Golf Club Road is a mess.
Thanks. Councilor Lightwell?
Yeah, so go back to what you said about the rare applicant, is that there's nothing in the budget for it for this year, right?
Correct.
But there was nothing in the budget for it last year either, correct?
We had money in place in preparation for the need to help fund that, yes.
Prior to the budget process?
The anticipation was that there'd be money from a major organization that would fund that, and so we had prepared for in case that funding didn't come through.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You're right. Thank you for refreshing my memory.
That's okay.
So Keith, in the administration budget, there's a capital outlay this year of $50,000, 2018-19 proposed. It was $20,000 last year, is $50,000 budgeted the year before. What is that? It's administration budget, page 47, first spreadsheet.
Oh, it's the network IT improvements is what that outlay is going to be towards, as we're continuing to try to improve our network IT. Several years ago, we had an audit of our IT system, and we made a lot of improvements to that, but we still have projects ongoing and trying to get that up to date. This year, we completed an upgrade to our Microsoft Office program, our mail program, our server, and to go cloud-based, and we have continued network improvements that we're going to try to do to provide more security and to have better performance through our systems.
Yeah, if I could also, in the past, several years ago, those costs were distributed across the entire organization in pieces. And one of the changes that we made was to bring all of the network type things under one IT type budget, in administration. And then those costs are recovered back from all the other funds. So that way it's a little bit more transparent in terms of what's getting done at a big level on the network. The individual workstations, the desktops and so forth, those are all going to be accounted for in the departments as they need replacement machines.
Does that encompass the automated billing by any chance? No?
We have made improvements to our Cassell system, including adding new components to our Cassell system. Most of that was done this year's budget, which included an inventory piece,
Fixed assets.
asset piece,
Budgeting
reporting piece.
Speaking of the utility billing system, is there, a lot of us out here are hearing, in the old days, the utility bills arrived with SCTCs probably the last day of the month, first day of the month. These days, they're arriving as late as the 4th, and the due date is the 10th. And just people at coffee shops are saying that why is if we spent the money on automating the system, why are they getting there later? And I think a couple of us here in the council have noted that as well.
I hadn't heard of this issue, but I'd be happy to have some people look into the issue and
They
see
don't charge
what's...
a late fee till after the 1st, so who cares?
Well, actually, they do after the 10th, is when the late fees kick in. Or no, first?
I've never paid my bill on time, and they've never charged me a late fee.
I always write down when I get my bill and pay it because I don't want to get a late
I
fee.
think we should make note of that. We can fix that, Luke.
You want, go ahead and step the microphone, Cindy. Cindy, microphone. So Cindy, introduce yourself too.
My name's Cindy Sharon. Our bills are sent out to Ben Mailing Service on the 30th and the last day of each month. They're mailed out on the 1st. That depends on when the 1st falls. If that falls on a Saturday, of course, they're going to be mailed out, and so the weekend's not going to count. So we can't control the mail service and how quickly they're processed, but they do go out on the 1st of each and every month, and you do not get a late fee until the end of the month. Although the due date is the 10th, you still have a grace period until the end of the month. But we cannot control the postal service and when that 1st falls on each month. So there's going to be always a 3 to 5 day, depending on when the 1st falls.
Could we maybe just change the due date to the 20th and call it a wash?
That's
Doesn't
something
change
we
the-
could do. We could discuss that, and we could,
That'd be a
we're in the
council policy
process of
decision,
changing
yeah. I mean,
that.
we can look into the issue and.
Yeah, I think we're getting off topic a little
Yeah.
bit. Let's get back on the budget, please.
Goal
Okay.
3 is neighborhood preservation. We completed the rental house licensing program. That was part of the goals this year. Expanded code enforcement, we've done that as well. Council recently just got information on the completed housing inventory. I know for the housing strategy, there's a second meeting based off of that, what we had in the completed housing inventory, and that's coming back in front of the council July. So just to update where those goals.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, on page 9, we have non-family households. What's a non-family household? Is that just a single person, or is that?
Mostly, yes. A one-person household
Okay,
is not a family.
okay. I just want to make
Or
sure.
you have unrelated people living together. They are not a family.
Okay.
So performance measures, these are the performance measures for the city administrator's office. So 10 ordinances, 12 resolutions, 19 meetings, including tonight, since last July 1st. And I think of interesting note, we've had 215 public records requests August of 17 through April of 18, and we're seeing that, I think, continue to rise. So we'll see that. Just wanted to point that out as well. So some of the accomplishments for the year, we completed job description updates, we completed performance review form updates, we implemented an internal finance policy, and we're going to have a total compensation benefits review, which will be done, I think, by June of this year, so before the end of the budget year. And I expect we'll bring that information to the council sometime in June or July. And then for the second year in a row, we received the GFOA Distinguished Budget Award. So changes, as passed out tonight and as presented, there's the iterations of our 5-year financial forecast. I think we continue to plan on enhancing these and growing these as well. I think it's important as we start looking long-term. Staff's been great about working and trying to give us ideas and working with other staff resources in terms of capital outlay projects and needs of different facilities. So I think those are going to be more and more important as we go along, and I appreciate the staff's effort in making that possible, because it's thinking longer term and trying to be more proactive instead of reactive. And so I want to thank them for their hard work and working on that, and please look at those 5-year forecasts. And then update of our personnel manual and a policy document, which is ongoing. I think the personnel manual will be done shortly. And then as part of that, we'll talk about a policy document, and that'll come before the council when that's complete, to share that information with you as well. So we talked a little bit about information technology already. We're spending significant amounts of time behind the scenes working on this. So I think since we were talking about a lot of this, I'll just go ahead and leave this slide and let it stand for itself. We have recently upgraded employee computers and phone systems. A lot of the computers were 8 to 10 years old that individuals are using, and we still had computer screens that were 14 inches. So we've upgraded all of those as well. And the difference has been noticeable. And people who said, I don't need a big screen, all want big screens now. So it's been a nice change. And so I hope over the next few years that our IT will get to a point of being efficient. And one of the things that's out there, and we've had that already happen, was a ransomware attack, and it's becoming more and more prominent in government agencies and entities, and it's become a huge issue. So network security is going to continue to be an issue we deal with because of the potentially devastating effects of those, and a lot of governments are really facing some real challenges with the ransomware attacks. So
I got a couple questions.
Sure, go ahead.
So, personnel service and material services. There's some big discrepancies between what was budgeted and what was spent. They kind of counteract themselves at the bottom line, but personnel was supposed to be 600 and we spent 48, or 600,000, we spent 480, and materials was supposed to be 400 and we spent 540. What's
big difference there is the finance director. We had a budget for the finance director.
Okay.
So
that's 120.
and we still have the finance director budgeted
Okay.
for this coming year.
And then for the materials and services, it's $140,000 extra.
Also 10 times what it was in 15, 16.
It's contract services and legal would be the two issues that would come out of that.
Okay, because in 15, 16, that's because it was all spread out over 15 different agencies.
Right.
And then now it's all combined. But
Combined in
that's all-
one source, right.
But $140,000 is a large jump of what's expected to. So we don't expect that, whatever brought that up, to repeat itself again?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I mean, we have some budgeted, but not to that extreme.
Okay.
Non-departmental operations highlights, we talked a little bit about this, the $400,000 for the CDBG fund, the $70,000 for the retirement plan unfunded actuarial liability, funding transfers to parks, library, and pool, and then the changes we've discussed already as well, the CDBG program, and then the UAL funding.
Keith, in the UAL funding in individual areas, for instance, admin has essentially zero UAL funding, but there's a sewer or wastewater worker or a water worker whose annual compensation is $22,000, the burden's probably $36,000, and I believe there's $7,000 UAL funding in that budget. There's significant UAL funding in all of the public works, but like none of the admin, and I realize that police is separate. Is there a reason that some people have UAL funding as a line item in their departments and some don't, and why it's very high in some in terms of percentage and why it's not in others?
Sure, glad to address the question. The reason it's not in the general fund shown in the various departments such as admin, planning, et cetera, broken out, is to try and have some sense of trending. And so to put this into the non-departmental, because it ultimately is benefiting all the different personnel in the general fund, we just made it one transaction, one time. In the other funds, we created a separate line item to track that separately, although in total, for personnel services, it's going to be lumped in, but we can break it out easily so that we have, again, the trending capability. The dollar differences that you're seeing all have to go back to how many dollars are being transferred out of the vehicle replacement fund based on the balances that were there, that are then coming back into those respective funds, and those respective funds then are taking that exact dollar amount and putting it towards the UAL.
Yeah, because there's no way, I tried to figure out if it was burden or if it was salary or what, and it's not a percent. It varies from an absolutely huge percentage of the $22,000 salary to very small in some other ones, and I just
and it's
looking
all
for
has
logic.
to do with the dollars in the vehicle replacement fund, that the balance that was there for that particular fund going back, and this is the general fund portion.
Andy, is it, Mr. Chairman, is it kind of a surprise that that's in the city retirement plan, we've got this unfunded actuarial liability kind of for the first time? We expect it in PERS.
Well,
I mean, that's a hole so deep we'll never see the bottom of it.
I'll address this. Yeah, I mean, there's two things with I mean, there's two big issues that we have kind of out there, which is PERS with the police department. We've had those conversations, and then our defined benefit plan. PERS is kind of, it's its own issue, but it's something that in terms of cost to our police officers and in ongoing costs, and I know when the auditor comes to give his speech, he's going to talk about PERS. That was one of the things he mentioned in our conversation with us. But what's happening is a couple things, which is it's the what we're assuming in terms of life expectancy for employees and what we're assuming in terms of our return on investment. And we're continuing to see life expectancy increase, and the returns recently have not been good. PERS is different, but for us, the tables we've used in terms of mortality, we've recently adjusted. I think what our expected return on investment for our defined benefit plan is 6%, but the change to the mortality tables that was made recently basically took us from being considered quote-unquote fully funded to underfunded. And one of the things Andy can talk about in a little more detail is the cost percentage each year to catch up those funds is pretty significant. So the idea behind this recommendation is we had this vehicle replacement fund that we said we'd make a recommendation on, and to pay down this, basically pays down future interest that we would have to do to try to minimize the future cost in terms of personnel. Can I cover that?
Yeah, pretty well. Yeah, to elaborate a little bit further on why we'd be recommending making the UAL investment. It's somewhat like having a negative amortization on your home. You have a loan for $200,000, but you're effectively paying back on $100,000. At some point, you're going to have to pay the interest and the principal on that $100,000 that you're not paying on. The assumed interest rate in the city's plan is 6.5%. So whatever amount is unfunded is effectively earning 6.5% on that amount. There is no other investment that the city has the ability to put their money into that's earning 6.5%. The pool right now, the local government investment pool is earning around 2%.
Who manages our retirement plan?
Milliman.
Milliman, and it's a combination of Milliman and who's the...
U.S. Bank.
Is the U.S. Bank that is the trustee that's overseeing the dollars.
What's the annual rate of return these days? I mean, it should be pretty decent these days in the past couple of years.
I don't have that number. Glad to get the number. And we were looking for a report from Milliman to show up late last week. Today, that has not come. That gives us the updated information on the UAL, the earnings, and the other assumptions associated with what the contribution rate is. So that's coming any day.
Spiders are returning 14%.
I understand, but unfortunately, these dollars aren't all in spiders, or they're wherever they're diversified in a widely diversified portfolio, much like PERS, and we'll see what the returns were. I mean, they're going to be what they are. One of the suggestions that would certainly make to Keith and to all of you is it's a sizable amount of money that's in there, $6-7 million, and it's going to continue to grow, and it's probably a wise thing to have, a small group of finance type people that are looking at that and paying attention to it on an ongoing basis to, so that, Keith isn't out there on his own or, that type of thing. It's something that,
That's
other people are...
$6.8 million as of whatever the figures were here, roughly, right? For the plan stands roughly 6.8 million currently?
Roughly in the $6.8 to $7 million number, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sizable amount of money that's being managed by outside interests, outside folks, and to make sure that they're, providing a good service for you.
It'd be great to get that as part of a council report or something, just because, it's half of our city, but it's a third of our city budget.
We can do that. I mean, Keith and I have talked about, the percentage that is ultimately being charged for administrative fee versus throwing it into a Vanguard type fund that has a very low overhead cost. So, there's some things, we've been chatting about, waiting for this report to kind of help solidify that, and I think, bringing you back a report makes a lot of sense, and we can do that.
That's cool. Thank you.
Streetlights, just a quick, the budget has a slight increase to account for streetlights and new developments. So as we get new development, that means new streetlights, which increases our utility cost of those. We're continuing to try to review LED streetlight replacement program. We've looked into trying to find programs that could help fund that, to advance that faster. I know we're still looking for that. And then every year we talk about there has been a adopted streetlight fee, but it has never been enacted by the city council. So it's there, just sitting there, but currently the rate is set at 0.
Are new lights going to be LED or not?
It's been enacted, but nobody liked it.
Keith, are the new lights going in LED?
No, we talked about having them transferred, and the cost of the gablers was too high at that particular time. It's been a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Oh, no, I'm not meaning for the existing one, the new development, the new lights.
No, I don't believe so.
We're trying for the ones that we have control over to have those be LED.
Paige, you have a question?
Yeah. I was curious if you were to enact that fee, the city council, what would it be for citizens? Like, is there an estimate of what that would be?
It would be a case of we'd come in and what's the current proposed budget, 116,000, say, here's, if we had instituted this fee, here's how much it would garner, and you'd have it necessarily,
It's been bantered back and forth before. $2 is my recollection the last time.
$2.50 is, yeah.
And would that help, like, if you were to do that, would that help replace with LED lights so that it would then cost the city less over time then?
There's a lot of options we could, to answer your question, yes, there's a lot of options we could do. We could put the fee with an idea of trying to go to LED. You could put the fee in terms of, if you wanted certain areas to have specialized streetlights or look and feel. There could just to cover the cost of the program. Some of our lights in our cities, and it does break down by style of light and can be quite a bit more, and replacing those, and those are the older bulbs that use more energy. Yeah. So there's options of what to do if this was ever something that the council wanted to do, whether they earmarked it for certain lighting programs or improvements, or they just wanted it to be something to cover the cost.
Are any of ours sustainable right now, like solar powered or anything?
No, but interestingly enough, there is a program, and I won't put staff on the spot because we just started looking at it last week, that is out there where cities can be designated as a solar city. There's approximately 200 cities in the country right now, and I think there's 3 in Oregon. So we just recently became aware of that, and we might look to pursue something like that and opportunities that may present themselves, but we'll see how that comes forward.
Keith, could we also apply for a Project Blue Skies grant from, God forbid, PP&L? Because it's a $100,000 grant.
We did look at Blue Skies last year in terms of programs. What the problem was the cost-benefit analysis, even with the grant, wasn't something that would be beneficial. We looked at the library, we looked at the wastewater plant, we looked at the water plant. And even with the grant, the cost of solar power had been more than our current by a significant amount. So I think if there's opportunities to find ones that can be at least cost neutral, even cost beneficial, we'd approach that. So we did look at Blue Sky last year, and I think we'll continue to explore those opportunities.
Thank you.
Paige, the number we were bounded around was 2,800 households, $2 a month is about $68,000 a year in streetlight revenue is what I think we were talking about.
That hasn't come up in a while.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor.
Just as an introduction, and real quickly, there a way to shield those tennis court lights from that neighborhood? It's roughly on outdoor lighting, but it's not, it's not a street light.
Tennis court lights themselves?
Yeah.
You can put shields on. I didn't realize they didn't have shields in them.
They don't, and it's a disruption.
Yeah, I imagine it is.
People can't sleep.
I'm not sure if shield would help, but we can look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Follow up.
I know we have resurfacing as tennis courts, so maybe as we're doing that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to give away Lance's.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just take them and twist them like that.
Yeah, the other requirements of your general fund include contingency, which is budgeted 10% of the overall spending, and then the balance of the funds, roughly $1.1 million, is shown as unappropriated carryover into the following year. The total of those two end up being just about 6 months' worth of carryover. So you're meeting your fund balance policy that you approved here about a year or so ago, by about a month. So it's an improvement.
Awesome. Any questions?
So this is the end of the general fund?
Anybody have any questions? If not, we'll have Jenna come chat about the library fund.
So, the mission of the Stayton Public Library is to bring people, information, and ideas together. The library provides equal access for all segments of our community and is much more than just a depository of books waiting for people to come check them out. It's a place for parents to learn how to engage in early literacy with their children, an opportunity for teens to become leaders, and for kids to succeed. The library is a place for people to find jobs and meet their lifelong learning goals. The Stayton Public Library supports learning in many ways, including through programs, speakers, workshops, and books. So the Stayton Library provides approximately 55,000 physical items. Our partnership with the Chemeketa Cooperative Regional Library Service also gives us access to about 2 million items that patrons can order from and bring into the library. We also provide access to 65,000 downloadable ebooks and audiobooks. Part of that is through CCRLS and part of that is through the State of Oregon Library. We provide programming for all ages, including story times, dance programs, our Oregon Author Series, our summer reading program for all ages, and much, much more. We also provide outreach story time to over 400 children per month. So our changes, we continue to develop our programming. This year we started a monthly do-it-yourself craft program for both adults and teens. We have partnered with the Independence Public Library to provide a monthly tech program for children and teens, primarily utilizing their Makerspace to Go kits. And we also held a very successful local art show and a local author fair this year. As part of CCRLS, we have completed our transition to RFID, which is things that we're doing on our materials. And we are in the process of doing an inventory of our collection and a cleanup of our catalog records and their shared catalog. Library funding includes $170,000 from the levy, a proposed transfer from the general fund of $190,800, and $86,000 from CCRLS reimbursement. The library is also very fortunate to have the support of both the Friends of the Library and the Stayton Library Foundation. The Friends of the Library raise money through used book sales and through their bookstore. And then the Library Foundation does events like the Father-Daughter Ball and Bruised by Its Books, and provides the funding for our early literacy outreach program. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Jen, in past years, you've given us total patron visits. Do you have a grand total of patron visits?
I have our patron visits up, 2,000 patron visits up over where we were last year.
Okay, can you re-answer that question?
Yep. So where we were in April of last year, we're up about 2,000.
Yeah, wait for her phone to stop.
Yes,
I can't hear her phone ringing.
That's okay, I can wait for her phone.
It's not ringing, it's an alarm.
Oh, okay.
It's saying it's time to go home.
Okay.
I didn't bring the number for April, Mark. So, but it is on my city council report, and we're up about 2,000 patron visits over where we were at last year. We're roughly about 80,000 visits a year. So.
How do you quantify that?
So we have door counters that count on the way in, but not on the way out.
Okay.
And then staff enters primarily through a staff entrance, so we don't count them unless we're running out.
I was just wondering, because if you count by books, because sometimes people will rent books and then they'll do computer time, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's purely that visit number that we report to city council is purely visits.
Okay.
It doesn't count checkouts or, it's purely counting door count visits.
I have a question about the roof. Is that in this year's budget that we'd be paying for it?
It is in this year's budget.
Okay, awesome.
When you say this year, you mean the current one that we're going to approve?
No.
It's in the current.
Approved it. The one that we approved last year, okay.
Yes.
And that was part of the local option levy proposed projects. So I'll talk about the pool. Last year, we took back over the pool from the YMCA. We talked at our budget process last year that, our budget was making a lot of estimates and guesstimates, and to be patient with us, with the year's data, we're starting to see some, I think, our numbers will start to get a little bit better. I'll talk about a few things in terms of revenues and expenses that I just kind of want to highlight, but as we go through, FTEs are no change from proposed from last year's budget. So, the strategic was the short term, taking back over the operations of the pool, the hours of operation and the funding. We put a fairly large amount of money in from the general fund just to help support that for the first year. We were able to reduce that by, I think, $20,000 this year, if I remember right off the top of my head. We didn't see some of the increases in memberships as we had budgeted, but I think there was some transition time from the YMCA to the city, and I think that number will increase, but we're going to be a little more conservative on some of those numbers. And then the cost of one of the big reductions was the cost in personnel services from what we had estimated. So we overestimated that, but it was being a little bit cautious on what we wanted to try to accomplish and to make sure that we had the funding necessary for the revenues. Long term, we talked about the community center. The pool is again a facility that we are going to need to look at that life cycle and make some determinations. I think one of the big challenges that I think I've had privately, if you go in the pool, you'll see the bottom of the pool is in pretty bad shape, and the real challenge that we have is the seasonal groundwater level, and even in August and September, the groundwater level is high enough at that pool area. And there is a real concern. We're going to need to go in and actually drain that pool and fix that bottom. And there's a good possibility that the pool could float, which would mean it would break. So it's just going to be one of those risks that we're going to have to reach a point where we're going to have to risk it. And then what happens if the pool functionally isn't able to operate anymore? So, but beyond all of that, I mean, in terms of updating the equipment, and it is an older system, and we are, working to keep it updated, but at some point, and in the 5-year forecast, you'll see some money kind of put aside to start looking at and having conversations about what we want to do with our pool long term. And that's not now or even next year, but in the coming years, we need to have that conversation as that life cycle reaches its end. So
I got basically the same question for the pool that was asked for the library. How many visits does it get? And then what's the comparable ratio from last year, assuming that their numbers they gave, if they gave numbers, are accurate? We
have some highlights, but one of the challenges is we don't really have the data and information from the YMCA. Same thing with some of their costs. We base it off of materials that we had and sat down and calculated and spent a lot of time doing some nice fancy math, and it was just nothing more than a guess, right? So.
Do we have our numbers that we've done this year through the 1st of May, or?
I don't have those in front of me, but I could get the data of them tracking that. I do have some information just in membership increases in terms of number of patrons, swim lessons taught, weekly lap swimmers, pool rentals, movement classes, and water aerobics classes. And those 16 and 25 are averages based on those classes. Yeah. I think over time we'll get more and more information about how successful we're being in terms of getting through that information.
Because I think that right there is going to be the number that says whether or not we need to put any money into fixing it or not.
I think more data will help us understand the value of the community, and again, that's a nice policy question, and maybe even a community question at some point. And then the only big change, we have $10,000 for pool equipment. I do want to say there's Friends of the Pool. They are a really nice partner, and for a lot of the little fixes and small things, and a few thousand here and a few thousand there is not necessarily small, but they are great about fundraising and great about taking care of issues. So we're changing station for the lifeguards and other equipment. They definitely are an active and engaged group and are a nice partner, much like our partners with the library as well. There is, in the future budget item, I guess I'll point out one last thing, there is a local option levy improvement. We don't have it in this budget, we are anticipating it in next year's budget, and it's to replace the front glass and metal for the pool and that front entryway.
Since I was a kid.
I just want to interject real quick. Coming up on 2 hours, so I think you should go on parks, but after that, what does the committee want to do? You want to continue tonight, or you want to carry it over till tomorrow after that?
Let's do Lance tomorrow. This is going to be a long one.
Oh, we could knock it all out tonight.
We're not going to knock it all out tonight.
We're about halfway through.
No, we're not.
Let's go sit down.
Did you guys want, are you going to do separate, you're going to do parks and then street?
Well, I just didn't do it all at once.
You were?
All public works, because all.
I think it's,
12 funds.
it's quite a bit. I think we should carry it over to tomorrow. You guys good with that?
I agree, I'll bring a sweater back with me.
Okay,
So we'll do everything tomorrow.
sure.
All right.
Any other questions?
I don't want to miss Jeopardy twice.
With that, we'll adjourn for tonight. I do have one statement. I will be gone tomorrow, so Paige will be in charge. And,
Thanks so much.
What I would ask is that you try to keep comments and questions to the end of the presentation, make it a little bit easier for acknowledgement of the chair to control the meeting. So, thank you.
Thanks.
With that, we're adjourned.